Welcome to Sinister Memory, where we unearth the most chilling and inexplicable events from the forgotten corners of our nation's past. If you're new here, sign up now and join a community that seeks truth in the shadows of history. And before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Your story matters too. Let's get to today's case. The first documented record of Clara Whitfield's extraordinary condition appears in a medical journal entry dated March 3rd, 1864, written by Dr. Amos Hartley, a traveling physician who served the isolated communities scattered throughout the Allegheny Mountains. Dr. Hartley, whose practice encompassed a territory of over 200 square miles, had encountered numerous cases of childhood disorders during his 20-year career, but nothing had prepared him for the case that would define the final years of his professional life. Clara Whitfield lived with her parents, Samuel and Martha Whitfield, on a remote farmstead located 37 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, in a valley so isolated that mail delivery occurred only twice monthly during the summer months and ceased entirely during the harsh Pennsylvania winters. Samuel Whitfield, a blacksmith by trade, had chosen this location specifically for its remoteness, seeking to avoid the chaos and violence of the Civil War that raged across the nation. According to Dr. Hartley's initial examination notes, Clara had been born in the spring of 1857, appearing to be a perfectly healthy infant with no signs of the condition that would later consume her young life. The child developed normally through her first 6 years, displaying the typical patterns of sleep and wakefulness that marked healthy childhood development. However, something fundamental changed in Clara's physiology during the winter of 1863, when the child began experiencing what her parents initially believed to be temporary insomnia. Dr. Hartley's medical notes describe a child who had not slept for a continuous period exceeding 96 days when he first examined her in early March 1864. The physician's training led him to suspect various medical explanations for Clara's condition: nervous disorders, dietary deficiencies, or psychological trauma related to the distant war. However, his detailed observations revealed a case that defied every conventional understanding of human physiology. The doctor noted that Clara showed no signs of the exhaustion, confusion, or physical deterioration that should have been evident after months without sleep. Her vital signs remained stable, her cognitive function appeared unimpaired, and her physical coordination showed no decline from her previous baseline. Most remarkably, the child demonstrated heightened awareness and alertness that seemed to increase rather than diminish as her sleepless period extended. Dr. Hartley's examination revealed that Clara's eyes had developed an unusual luminescence during nighttime hours, reflecting available light with an intensity that reminded the physician of nocturnal animals. The child's pupils responded normally to changes in illumination during daylight, but after sunset, her eyes seemed to gather and amplify even the faintest sources of light, allowing her to navigate in complete darkness with supernatural precision. Perhaps most disturbing to Dr. Hartley was Clara's behavior during the midnight hours when her family slept. The physician spent 3 consecutive nights observing the child, documenting activities that challenged his understanding of normal childhood development. Clara would spend these dark hours standing motionless at windows, staring into the forest surrounding their property with an intensity that suggested she was observing phenomena invisible to adult eyes. The doctor's notes describe conversations he attempted to conduct with Clara during these nocturnal observations. The child spoke in a voice that maintained its normal, childish qualities during daylight hours, but developed deeper, more resonant tones after darkness fell. Her vocabulary and sentence structure became markedly more sophisticated during nighttime conversations, incorporating words and concepts that no 7-year-old should possess. Dr. Hartley documented Clara's claims about what she observed during her sleepless nights. The child described seeing lights moving through the forest in organized patterns, hearing voices speaking in languages she could not identify, and witnessing gatherings of figures that she insisted were not entirely human. The physician initially dismissed these accounts as hallucinations brought on by sleep deprivation, but the consistency and detail of Clara's descriptions gradually convinced him that the child was experiencing something beyond mere imagination. Most troubling was Dr. Hartley's discovery that Clara's sleeplessness was having profound effects on her family and their immediate environment. Samuel and Martha Whitfield reported experiencing increasingly vivid and disturbing dreams that seemed to center around their daughter's nocturnal activities. Both parents described shared nightmares in which they found themselves following Clara through dark forests toward destinations they feared to reach. The physician's notes conclude with his growing certainty that Clara's condition represented something far more complex than a simple sleep disorder. His final entry from this initial examination period reads, "I fear that young Clara has not lost the ability to sleep, but rather has gained the ability to remain conscious during states that should render her unconscious. What she witnesses during these wakeful nights may be truths that sleep mercifully conceals from the rest of humanity." Dr. Hartley's return visit to the Whitfield farmstead in April 1864 revealed that Clara's condition had progressed in ways that challenged every medical theory of his era. His journal entries from this period, discovered among his personal effects following his death in 1889, document changes in the child that went far beyond prolonged insomnia, suggesting that Clara's sleeplessness had unlocked aspects of human consciousness that were meant to remain dormant. The physician found that Clara had now been without sleep for nearly 150 consecutive days, a period that should have proven fatal to any human being. Yet the child not only survived, but appeared to be thriving in ways that defied medical understanding. Her physical growth had accelerated beyond normal parameters, with Clara having gained several inches in height and showing muscle development that suggested physical activity far exceeding what her parents reported observing during daylight hours. More disturbing were the cognitive changes Dr. Hartley documented during his week-long stay at the Whitfield property. Clara's intelligence seemed to have expanded exponentially during her sleepless months, with the child demonstrating knowledge of subjects she had never studied and displaying reasoning abilities that surpassed many educated adults. The physician recorded conversations with Clara in which she discussed complex mathematical concepts, astronomical phenomena, and historical events with an accuracy that suggested access to information sources beyond her isolated mountain environment. Dr. Hartley's notes reveal his growing conviction that Clara's enhanced abilities were somehow connected to her observations during the dark hours when others slept. The child spoke with increasing confidence about the activities she witnessed in the surrounding forest, describing gatherings of entities that she claimed had been teaching her during her nightly vigils. These nocturnal instructors, according to Clara's accounts, communicated through methods that transcended normal speech, imparting knowledge directly into her consciousness through visual and auditory experiences that occurred beyond the range of normal human perception. The physician documented his attempts to observe these phenomena firsthand, spending multiple nights stationed at windows alongside Clara in hopes of witnessing what captured the child's attention so completely. His journal describes experiencing strange sensations during these vigils, a sense of being watched from the darkness, subtle changes in air pressure and temperature, and sounds that seem to originate from multiple directions simultaneously without any identifiable source. Most significantly, Dr. Hartley recorded instances when his own perceptions seemed to briefly align with Clara's enhanced awareness. During these moments, which typically lasted only seconds, The physician reported seeing movements in the forest that appeared to follow organized patterns, as if groups of entities were conducting coordinated activities among the trees. These glimpses convinced Dr. Hartley that Clara's accounts were not hallucinations, but genuine observations of phenomena that remained hidden from normal human consciousness. The doctor's examination of Clara's parents revealed that their proximity to their daughter's condition was beginning to affect their own sleep patterns and mental states. Samuel Whitfield reported experiencing periods of involuntary wakefulness, during which he felt compelled to check on Clara, only to find her engaged in silent conversations with empty air or manipulating objects in ways that suggested she was following instructions from unseen sources. Martha Whitfield's condition appeared more severe, with the woman experiencing what Dr. Hartley diagnosed as sympathetic insomnia that seemed to mirror her daughter's sleepless state. The mother would lie motionless in bed with her eyes closed, appearing to sleep, yet would later demonstrate knowledge of events that had occurred throughout the house during these supposed periods of rest. Mrs. Whitfield claimed that she could perceive Clara's nighttime activities even while unconscious, as if their mother-daughter bond had created a psychological link that transcended normal sleep states. Dr. Hartley's medical notes from this period reveal his growing concern about the sustainability of the family's situation. The physician observed that the Whitfield household had become isolated not only geographically, but also psychologically, with all three family members showing signs of detachment from normal human rhythms and concerns. Their conversations increasingly focused on Clara's nocturnal observations and the entities she claimed to encounter, while practical matters like farming, food preparation, and maintenance of their property received diminishing attention. Perhaps most troubling was Dr. Hartley's documentation of changes in the environment surrounding the Whitfield farmstead. The physician noted that local wildlife had begun avoiding the property entirely, with no birds, small mammals, or insects observed within a quarter-mile radius of the house. The vegetable garden that had provided the family's sustenance showed signs of unusual growth patterns, with some plants flourishing beyond normal expectations, while others withered despite adequate care and favorable conditions. The doctor's journal entries conclude with his observation that Clara's sleeplessness seemed to be creating a zone of altered reality around the Whitfield property, where normal physical and psychological laws operated differently than in the surrounding region. His final entry from this visit reads, "I fear that Clara has not simply lost the ability to sleep, but has instead become a conduit for forces that use the darkness hours to influence our waking world. What she learns during her endless nights may be knowledge that humanity was never meant to possess." The correspondence between Dr. Hartley and his colleague, Dr. Benjamin Morrison of the Philadelphia College of Medicine, provides crucial insight into the medical establishment's response to Clara Whitfield's unprecedented condition. These letters, preserved in the college's historical archives, document a physician's struggle to communicate impossible observations to a scientific community unprepared to accept evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about human physiology and consciousness. Dr. Hartley's letter, dated May 15, 1864, marks his first attempt to seek professional consultation regarding Clara's case. The physician's prose reveals his internal conflict between scientific skepticism and empirical observation, as he attempts to describe phenomena that his medical training told him were impossible, yet which he had witnessed repeatedly during his visits to the Whitfield farmstead. The letter describes Clara's condition in clinical terms that barely mask Dr. Hartley's growing alarm. He reports that the child had now remained awake for over 200 consecutive days, without showing any of the physiological deterioration that medical science predicted should occur after even short periods of sleep deprivation. More troubling, Clara's cognitive and physical abilities continued to enhance rather than decline, suggesting that her sleeplessness was somehow beneficial rather than harmful to her development. Dr. Morrison's response, dated June 2nd, 1864, reflects the typical reaction of the medical establishment to reports that challenged accepted scientific doctrine. The Philadelphia physician diplomatically suggests that Dr. Hartley may be misinterpreting normal childhood sleep patterns, proposing that Clara might be experiencing brief periods of unconsciousness that could be mistaken for wakefulness by untrained observers. Dr. Morrison recommends standard treatments for childhood insomnia, including herbal preparations and changes in diet and environment. However, Dr. Hartley's subsequent correspondence reveals that he had anticipated such skepticism and had taken measures to document Clara's condition with scientific rigor. His letter of June 20th includes detailed hourly observations conducted over a 2-week period, during which he maintained continuous surveillance of the child with the assistance of her parents. These records show no evidence of sleep episodes, even during periods when Clara remained motionless for hours at a time. More significantly, Dr. Hartley's documentation included transcriptions of Clara's nocturnal utterances, which had evolved from simple descriptions of forest activities to complex discussions of topics far beyond her educational background. The physician noted that Clara spoke with increasing sophistication about subjects including astronomy, geology, and what appeared to be advanced mathematics, despite having received no formal education beyond basic literacy from her mother. Dr. Morrison's growing concern becomes evident in his July correspondence, as the Philadelphia physician begins to acknowledge that Clara's case might represent a genuine medical anomaly. However, his letters also reveal the professional risks that Dr. Hartley faced by continuing to report observations that contradicted established medical doctrine. Dr. Morrison warns his colleague that publishing accounts of such phenomena could damage his professional reputation and credibility within the medical community. The exchange between the two physicians takes a darker turn in August 1864, when Dr. Hartley reports that Clara's nocturnal activities had begun to include physical manifestations that could be observed by others. The child had started creating elaborate drawings and writings during her wakeful nights, producing works that demonstrated artistic and literary abilities far exceeding her age and education. These creations, according to Dr. Hartley's descriptions, depicted scenes and symbols that seemed to reference historical events and cultural traditions of which Clara should have had no knowledge. Perhaps most disturbing were Dr. Hartley's reports of Clara's apparent ability to predict future events based on her nighttime observations. The physician documented several instances when the child accurately foretold the arrival of visitors, changes in weather patterns, and even military movements related to the ongoing civil war, despite the family's isolation from normal information sources. These predictions, Dr. Hartley noted, were always delivered in Clara's enhanced nighttime voice and were accompanied by detailed explanations of how she had obtained this knowledge through her communications with the nocturnal entities. Dr. Morrison's final preserved letter from this correspondence, dated September 10, 1864, reveals a physician whose scientific worldview had been profoundly shaken by his colleagues' reports. The Philadelphia doctor acknowledges that Clara's case appears to represent something beyond conventional medical understanding, while simultaneously expressing fear about the implications of such phenomena for human knowledge and safety. The letter concludes with Dr. Morrison's recommendation that Dr. Hartley cease his observations of Clara and distance himself from the case entirely. The Philadelphia physician writes, "There are aspects of human existence that medical science may not be prepared to investigate. Some conditions may be better left unstudied, particularly when their examination threatens not only professional reputation, but potentially the sanity of those who witness them. Dr. Hartley's response to this advice, if any was written, has not survived in the historical record. However, subsequent evidence suggests that the physician ignored his colleagues' warnings and continued his documentation of Clara's condition, a decision that would lead to consequences that neither doctor could have anticipated when their correspondence began. The autumn of 1864 brought the distant Civil War closer to the isolated Whitfield farmstead when Union Army scouts arrived in the region, searching for Confederate sympathizers and draft evaders rumored to be hiding in the mountain valleys of western Pennsylvania. The arrival of these soldiers, documented in military dispatches recently discovered in the National Archives, would provide outside witnesses to Clara's condition and create the first official government records of the phenomena surrounding the sleepless child. Sergeant William Crawford's report to his commanding officer, dated October 3, 1864, describes his unit's arrival at the Whitfield property during a routine patrol of the remote mountain areas. The sergeant's military training and practical experience gave him a skeptical perspective on civilian claims, yet his official dispatch reveals a growing unease with the situation he encountered at the isolated farmstead. Crawford's initial observations focused on the unusual appearance of the Whitfield family members, noting that all three individuals showed signs of prolonged stress and exhaustion, despite claims that they maintained normal daily routines. The sergeant found Samuel Whitfield to be cooperative but distracted, frequently glancing toward his daughter with an expression that Crawford described as equal parts love and terror. Martha Whitfield appeared even more affected, speaking in fragmented sentences and showing symptoms that the sergeant recognized from his experience with soldiers suffering from battlefield shock. However, it was Clara herself who captured the majority of Sergeant Crawford's attention and concern. The soldier's report describes a child whose appearance and behavior defied normal expectations, noting that 7-year-old Clara possessed an alertness and intensity that reminded him of veteran sentries maintaining watch during enemy territory operations. The child's eyes, according to Crawford's documentation, seemed to track movements and sounds that remained undetectable to the adult soldiers, suggesting a level of sensory awareness that exceeded normal human capabilities. The sergeant's dispatch reveals that his unit remained at the Whitfield property for 3 days while investigating reports of suspicious activity in the area. During this period, Crawford and his men had the opportunity to observe Clara's nighttime behavior firsthand, leading to some of the most detailed military documentation of supernatural phenomena in Civil War-era records. Crawford's account of Clara's nocturnal activities reads like a military intelligence report on enemy movements, with precise timings and detailed descriptions of observed behaviors. The sergeant noted that Clara maintained a rigid schedule of nighttime activities, beginning each evening at precisely sunset and continuing until dawn, with periods of different behaviors that seemed to follow a predetermined pattern. These activities included standing vigil at various windows, manipulating objects in ways that suggested she was following instructions, and engaging in whispered conversations with unseen entities. Most significantly for military purposes, Sergeant Crawford documented Clara's apparent ability to detect the presence and movements of his soldiers even when they attempted to maintain concealment during reconnaissance exercises. The child consistently identified the locations of sentries posted around the property, predicted changes in guard rotations before they were implemented, and demonstrated knowledge of military plans that had been discussed only among the unit's officers. The sergeant's growing concern about Clara's abilities led him to conduct informal tests of her apparent prescient capabilities. Crawford's report describes asking Clara about Union Army movements in distant regions, only to receive detailed and accurate information about troop positions and battle outcomes that would not be confirmed through official channels for weeks after her predictions. The child delivered this intelligence with the same matter-of-fact tone she used to describe her nightly observations, suggesting that her access to information about distant events was as natural to her as normal sensory perception. Private Jonas Mitchell's personal diary, preserved among family papers and recently donated to the Pennsylvania Military Museum, provides additional perspective on the soldiers' experience at the Whitfield farmstead. Mitchell's entries reveal that Clara's presence had a profound psychological effect on the entire unit, with veteran soldiers becoming increasingly uncomfortable as their exposure to the child's abilities continued. The private's diary describes incidents when Clara would appear silently beside sentries who had been certain they were alone, offering warnings about approaching dangers that consistently proved accurate. These warnings, according to Mitchell's account, prevented several potentially serious accidents and may have saved the lives of soldiers who would have otherwise encountered hazardous terrain during nighttime patrols. Perhaps most disturbing to the soldiers was Clara's apparent knowledge of their personal histories and private thoughts. Mitchell documents instances when the child referenced events from individual soldiers, pasts that had never been shared with their military colleagues, and made observations about their fears and concerns that demonstrated an intimate understanding of their psychological states. Sergeant Crawford's final report on the Whitfield investigation reveals a military professional struggling to balance his duty to document observed phenomena with his awareness that his superiors would likely dismiss reports of supernatural activities. The sergeant concludes his dispatch with a recommendation that the Whitfield property be placed under permanent military observation, citing unusual circumstances that may be relevant to national security concerns. However, Crawford's recommendation was never implemented, as his unit received emergency orders to redeploy to active combat zones before formal surveillance could be established. The sergeant's final notation in the military record states simply, "Investigation terminated due to operational priorities. No immediate threat to Union activities identified. Further study recommended if resources permit." The abrupt departure of Crawford's unit left the Whitfield family once again isolated with Clara's condition, but the soldiers' testimonies had created the first official government documentation of phenomena that would continue to challenge conventional understanding for decades to come. Dr. Hartley's last journey to the Whitfield farmstead in November 1864 was prompted by an urgent letter from Samuel Whitfield describing changes in Clara's condition that went far beyond anything previously documented. The physician's journal entries from this final visit, written in increasingly erratic handwriting, reveal a medical professional confronting phenomena that shattered his remaining faith in rational scientific explanation. The doctor found Clara in a state that challenged every assumption about human physiology and consciousness. The child had now remained sleepless for over 300 consecutive days, a period that should have proven fatal multiple times over. Yet she exhibited physical and mental capabilities that far exceeded normal human limits. Clara had grown several inches since Dr. Hartley's last visit, developing muscle tone and coordination that suggested intensive physical training, despite her parents' reports that she rarely engaged in normal childhood activities during daylight hours. More significantly, Clara's cognitive abilities had expanded to encompass knowledge that seemed impossible for any individual to acquire through conventional means. Dr. Hartley documented conversations with the child, covering subjects ranging from advanced astronomical calculations to detailed descriptions of geographical regions she had never visited. Clara spoke about these topics with the authority of an expert scholar, providing information that the physician later verified through consultation with academic sources in Philadelphia and New York. Dr. Hartley's examination revealed that Clara's sleeplessness had begun to affect her in ways that transcended normal medical categories. The child's vital signs showed patterns that defied physiological logic. Her heart rate and respiration remained steady during periods when she should have been experiencing extreme stress, while fluctuating dramatically during seemingly calm moments. Her body temperature varied throughout the day, in cycles that corresponded not to environmental conditions, but to what appeared to be her internal schedule of nocturnal activities. Perhaps most disturbing were the changes Dr. Hartley observed in Clara's sensory capabilities. The child demonstrated the ability to perceive sounds, lights, and movements at distances that exceeded normal human range, often reacting to stimuli that remained completely undetectable to adults in her vicinity. These enhanced senses seemed to be most acute during nighttime hours, when Clara's awareness expanded to encompass events occurring throughout the surrounding mountain region. The physician's documentation includes detailed accounts of Clara's nocturnal communications with entities that she claimed inhabited the forest surrounding their property. These conversations, which Dr. Hartley observed from concealment, involved Clara speaking in languages that no 7-year-old should know, receiving responses that seemed to come from multiple directions simultaneously. The doctor noted that these exchanges followed patterns suggesting formal instruction, as if Clara were participating in educational sessions conducted by supernatural teachers. Dr. Hartley's medical notes reveal his growing certainty that Clara's condition represented something far more complex than a sleep disorder. The physician documented his belief that the child's sleeplessness had somehow opened doorways in her consciousness that normally remained sealed, allowing her to perceive and interact with aspects of reality that were hidden from ordinary human awareness. This expanded consciousness, according to Dr. Hartley's observations, was transforming Clara into something that transcended normal childhood development. The doctor's examination of Samuel and Martha Whitfield revealed that their prolonged exposure to Clara's condition had begun to affect them in ways that mirrored their daughter's transformation. Both parents showed signs of enhanced sensory awareness, reporting the ability to perceive activities and presences that had previously been imperceptible to them. Their sleep patterns had become increasingly irregular, with both experiencing vivid dreams that seemed to be shared with Clara's waking experiences. Most troubling was Dr. Hartley's discovery that the influence of Clara's condition was spreading beyond the immediate family to affect the surrounding environment. The physician documented changes in local wildlife patterns, with animals avoiding the Whitfield property in ever-widening circles. Vegetation in the area showed unusual growth patterns, with some plants flourishing beyond normal expectations, while others withered despite favorable conditions. Dr. Hartley's final journal entries from this visit reveal a physician whose professional confidence had been completely undermined by his observations of phenomena that challenged every principle of medical science. The doctor wrote of feeling as though he were witnessing the emergence of a new form of human consciousness, one that possessed capabilities that normal individuals could neither comprehend nor safely approach. The physician's last detailed observation concerns Clara's apparent awareness of future events based on information received during her nocturnal communications. The child accurately predicted several specific occurrences that would affect their isolated community, including the arrival of additional military units, changes in weather patterns that would influence local farming, and even the outcomes of distant Civil War battles. These predictions, delivered with calm certainty, convinced Dr. Hartley that Clara's enhanced consciousness provided access to information that transcended normal temporal limitations. Dr. Hartley's final journal entry from the Whitfield farmstead, dated November 28, 1864, reveals a man whose encounter with Clara's condition had fundamentally altered his understanding of human potential and cosmic reality. The physician wrote, "I have witnessed the birth of something unprecedented in human experience. Clara Whitfield has become a bridge between our limited waking consciousness and realms of existence that our minds were never meant to comprehend. I fear that her transformation is only the beginning of changes that will challenge everything humanity believes about the nature of life itself. Word of Clara Whitfield's extraordinary condition began to spread throughout the scattered mountain communities of western Pennsylvania during the winter of 1864-1865, despite the family's isolated location and their attempts to maintain secrecy about their daughter's abilities. The testimonies collected from neighboring families during this period, preserved in local church records and personal correspondence, reveal how Clara's influence began to extend far beyond the boundaries of her family's property. The Reverend Nathaniel Morse of the Bethel Mountain Chapel documented the first reports of unusual phenomena affecting families living within a 10-mile radius of the Whitfield farmstead. His ecclesiastical records from December 1864 describe parishioners approaching him with accounts of shared dreams, unexplained periods of wakefulness, and sensory experiences that seem to originate from an external source. These reports, initially dismissed as products of wartime stress and isolation, became increasingly consistent and detailed as winter progressed. Jeremiah Hastings, whose farm lay 6 miles northeast of the Whitfield property, provided one of the most detailed accounts of how Clara's condition seemed to influence the surrounding community. Hastings' letter to his brother in Ohio, dated January 10, 1865, describes a gradual change in his family's sleep patterns that began during the autumn months and intensified throughout the early winter. The farmer reported that all 4 members of his household began experiencing periods of spontaneous wakefulness during which they felt compelled to observe the night sky and surrounding landscape with unusual attention. More significantly, Hastings documented instances when his family members seemed to share similar dreams and waking visions that centered around a young girl who communicated with entities dwelling in the mountain forests. These experiences, according to Hastings' account, provided his family with information about local conditions and future events that proved remarkably accurate. The farmer noted that his livestock began reacting to weather changes days before they occurred, and his winter preparations were guided by insights that seemed to come from sources beyond normal intuition. Sarah McKnight, a widow who maintained a small homestead 8 miles south of the Whitfield property, recorded her experiences in a diary that was discovered among her possessions following her death in 1902. Mrs. McKnight's entries from the winter of 1864-1865 describe a transformation in her daily routines that began with occasional sleepless nights and evolved into a complete alteration of her consciousness during dark hours. The widow's diary reveals that her periods of nighttime wakefulness were accompanied by enhanced sensory awareness that allowed her to perceive activities occurring throughout the mountain region. Mrs. McKnight wrote of being able to sense the movements of animals, changes in weather patterns, and even the presence of human beings at distances that should have been beyond normal perception. These abilities, she noted, were most pronounced during the darkest nights and seemed to be strongest when she focused her attention toward the direction of the Whitfield farmstead. Perhaps most disturbing were Mrs. McKnight's accounts of receiving what she described as educational communications during her sleepless periods. The widow reported that her enhanced consciousness provided access to knowledge about subjects she had never studied, including advanced understanding of natural phenomena, historical events, and scientific principles. This information, according to her diary entries, was transmitted through methods that transcended normal learning processes, being implanted directly into her awareness through visual and auditory experiences that occurred beyond the range of ordinary sensation. The Reverend Morse's records include testimonies from multiple families describing similar transformations in their nocturnal experiences. These accounts consistently mention the presence of a guiding consciousness that seemed to originate from a central source in the mountains, providing instruction and awareness that enhanced the recipient's understanding of their environment and circumstances. The minister noted that these experiences were reported most frequently by families with children, suggesting that youth might be more susceptible to whatever influence was spreading through the region. Dr. Marcus Reed, a physician who served several of the affected communities, documented the physical and psychological effects of these phenomena in a report submitted to the Pennsylvania State Medical Society in February 1865. Dr. Reed's clinical observations revealed that individuals experiencing the enhanced nocturnal consciousness showed no signs of the health deterioration typically associated with sleep disruption. Instead, many subjects demonstrated improved physical coordination, enhanced cognitive function, and increased resistance to common illnesses. However, Dr. Reed also noted troubling psychological changes in affected individuals, including decreased interest in normal social activities, reduced emotional responses to conventional concerns, and an increasing preoccupation with nocturnal observations and communications. The physician expressed concern that these changes suggested a fundamental alteration in human consciousness that might have unpredictable long-term consequences for community stability and individual well-being. The winter months of 1864-1865 saw the establishment of informal networks among affected families, with individuals sharing information about their nocturnal experiences and coordinating their enhanced awareness to monitor regional conditions. These networks, according to contemporary accounts, operated with an efficiency and accuracy that surpassed conventional communication methods, providing early warning of military movements, weather hazards, and other threats to community safety. Most significantly, multiple sources from this period describe a growing sense among affected individuals that their enhanced consciousness was preparing them for some undefined future event or transformation. The consistency of these reports, combined with their geographic distribution throughout the mountain region, suggests that Clara Whitfield's condition had begun to catalyze changes that extended far beyond her individual circumstances, potentially affecting the fundamental nature of human awareness throughout the entire area. The spring of 1865 brought changes to Clara Whitfield's condition that transcended every previous manifestation of her extraordinary abilities. Dr. Hartley's emergency return to the Whitfield farmstead in March 1865, prompted by increasingly desperate communications from Samuel Whitfield, would document the culmination of nearly a year of supernatural transformation that challenged the very foundations of human understanding. The physician found Clara in a state that defied every category of medical classification. The child, now approaching her 8th birthday, had developed capabilities that seemed to operate outside the normal constraints of physical reality. Dr. Hartley's journal entries from this period, written in handwriting that becomes increasingly erratic as his observations progressed, describe a being who retained Clara's physical appearance while manifesting powers that belonged more to mythology than medical science. Clara's sleeplessness had now extended beyond 400 consecutive days, yet rather than showing deterioration, the child exhibited vitality and awareness that surpassed any human being Dr. Hartley had previously encountered. The physician documented Clara's ability to perceive events occurring at vast distances, accurately describing military activities, political developments, and natural phenomena throughout the eastern United States, despite her continued isolation in the Pennsylvania mountains. More remarkably, Clara had begun to demonstrate what Dr. Hartley could only describe as temporal awareness that transcended normal sequential experience. The child spoke with detailed knowledge of historical events that had occurred before her birth, while simultaneously describing future occurrences with a precision that defied logical explanation. These temporal perceptions, according to Dr. Hartley's observations, were delivered with the same matter-of-fact tone Clara used to describe immediate sensory experiences. The physician's documentation reveals that Clara's consciousness had expanded to encompass what she described as direct communication with entities existing in multiple temporal and spatial dimensions. These communications, which Clara reported, occurred continuously during her waking hours, provided her with access to information and perspectives that existed outside normal human experience. Dr. Hartley noted that these exchanges seemed to be transforming Clara into something that transcended individual human consciousness while retaining her essential personality and emotional connections to her family. Samuel and Martha Whitfield had undergone their own profound transformations during their daughter's evolution. Dr. Hartley's examination revealed that both parents now exhibited enhanced sensory and cognitive capabilities that paralleled Clara's development, though to a lesser degree. The couple demonstrated the ability to communicate with their daughter through methods that did not require verbal exchange, sharing thoughts and perceptions through what appeared to be direct consciousness transfer. Most significantly, Dr. Hartley documented that the Whitfield family's transformation was beginning to affect the fundamental nature of their immediate environment. The physician observed that the laws of physics seemed to operate differently within the vicinity of their farmstead bowl, with gravity, light, and sound behaving in ways that contradicted normal scientific principles. Objects would move without apparent force. Shadows would exist without corresponding light sources, and sounds would carry meaning and emotion beyond their acoustic properties. The doctor's final detailed observations concerned Clara's apparent preparation for what she described as a transition that would occur during the upcoming summer months. The child spoke with calm certainty about changes that would affect not only her family, but the entire network of individuals throughout the mountain region who had been influenced by her condition. Clara described this transition as a necessary evolution that would allow human consciousness to expand beyond its current limitations, accessing realities that had previously been hidden from normal awareness. Dr. Hartley's journal entries reveal his growing realization that Clara's transformation represented something far more significant than an individual medical anomaly. The physician documented his belief that the child had become a catalyst for changes that would fundamentally alter the nature of human existence, opening doorways to expanded consciousness that had remained sealed throughout recorded history. The doctor's observations include detailed accounts of Clara's interactions with entities that she claimed were guiding the transformation process. These beings, according to Clara's descriptions, existed in states of consciousness that transcended physical form while maintaining the ability to influence material reality. Their purpose, as Clara explained to Dr. Hartley, was to facilitate humanity's evolution toward expanded awareness that would allow direct perception of multidimensional existence. Perhaps most disturbing was Dr. Hartley's documentation of his own psychological transformation during his extended exposure to Clara's enhanced consciousness. The physician reported experiencing periods of expanded awareness during which he could perceive realities that had previously been invisible to him. These experiences, while providing remarkable insights into the nature of existence, also revealed the profound limitations of normal human consciousness and the potentially dangerous consequences of expanding awareness too rapidly. Dr. Hartley's final journal entry from this visit, dated April 15th of 1865, reveals a physician whose encounter with Clara's transformation had fundamentally altered his understanding of reality itself. The doctor wrote, "Clara Whitfield has become a doorway between our limited human awareness and infinite realms of consciousness that exist beyond our current comprehension. Her transformation is preparing our entire species for an evolutionary leap that will either elevate humanity to unprecedented heights of awareness or destroy us through exposure to realities we are not yet equipped to understand. The physician's subsequent departure from the Whitfield farmstead marked the end of formal medical documentation of Clara's condition. Dr. Hartley would never again practice conventional medicine, dedicating his remaining years to studying consciousness and reality in ways that challenged every principle of 19th-century scientific thought. The final documented events at the Whitfield farmstead occurred during the summer solstice of 1865, as witnessed by a survey team from the Pennsylvania Railroad Company who had been commissioned to map potential routes through the mountain region. Their official report, filed with the company's engineering department and subsequently sealed in corporate archives for over a century, provides the last reliable account of Clara Whitfield and her family before their disappearance from recorded history. Chief Surveyor Thomas Brennan's report, dated June 22, 1865, describes his team's arrival at the Whitfield property during what they had expected to be a routine mapping expedition. However, Brennan's detailed documentation reveals that the surveyors encountered phenomena that challenged their understanding of physical reality and human capability. The report describes a farmstead that seemed to exist partially outside normal spatial and temporal constraints, where conventional measurement techniques produced inconsistent and impossible results. Brennan noted that the Whitfield property appeared to occupy more space than its geographic boundaries should have contained, with internal distances that exceeded external measurements by significant margins. The family's farmhouse, which from outside appeared to be a modest two-story structure, contained rooms and corridors that suggested a much larger building. Most disturbing, the surveyors reported that these spatial anomalies seemed to shift depending upon the time of day and the observer's state of consciousness. The survey team's encounter with Clara herself provided the most detailed final description of the child's ultimate transformation. Brennan's report describes an 8-year-old girl whose appearance retained normal human characteristics while exhibiting capabilities that transcended every known limitation of individual consciousness. Clara demonstrated awareness of the surveyor's presence, purpose, and personal histories despite having no conventional means of acquiring such information. Most remarkably, Clara addressed each member of the survey team by name and provided detailed information about their families, professional backgrounds, and private concerns. She spoke to the men about events from their past and future with equal clarity, describing occurrences that would not be verifiable for months or years after her predictions. These demonstrations of enhanced awareness were delivered with the gentle demeanor of a normal child, creating a profound disconnect between Clara's apparent innocence and her impossible abilities. Brennan's documentation includes transcripts of conversations with Samuel and Martha Whitfield, who explained that their daughter's transformation had reached its intended culmination during the previous weeks. The parents described Clara's evolution as a preparation for what they termed the Great Awakening, an event that would affect not only their family, but potentially all of humanity. They spoke of their daughter's role as a bridge between normal human consciousness and expanded states of awareness that would eventually become accessible to the entire species. The survey team witnessed Clara's nocturnal activities during their 3-day stay at the property, observing phenomena that challenged every principle of physics and consciousness study. Brennan's report describes watching Clara interact with entities that appeared as shifting patterns of light and shadow, conducting conversations that seemed to occur through direct thought transmission rather than verbal communication. These exchanges, according to the surveyor's observations, involved the sharing of information and perspectives that encompassed multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. Perhaps most significantly, the survey team documented Clara's apparent ability to exist in multiple temporal states concurrently. The child would simultaneously engage in normal childhood activities while conducting complex communications with dimensional entities and providing detailed observations of events occurring at distant locations and times. Brennan noted that Clara seemed to experience past, present, and future as equally accessible states rather than sequential progressions. The surveyor's final night at the Whitfield property coincided with what the family described as Clara's final transition. Brennan's report provides a detailed account of events that began at sunset on June 21st and continued until dawn the following day. The survey team observed Clara undergoing a transformation that seemed to involve the gradual dissolution of the barriers between her individual consciousness and the universal awareness she had been developing throughout her sleepless year. According to Brennan's documentation, Clara's transformation was accompanied by environmental changes that affected the entire mountain region. The surveyors reported experiencing expanded sensory awareness that allowed them to perceive activities and presences throughout the surrounding area. They described feeling connected to a network of consciousness that extended far beyond their immediate location, providing access to information and perspectives that transcended normal human limitations. The survey team's final observations describe Clara's apparent achievement of a state of consciousness that allowed her to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions while maintaining her connection to physical reality. The child bid farewell to each surveyor individually, providing them with personal messages and insights that would prove remarkably relevant to their future lives. She spoke of her continued existence in expanded states of consciousness that would remain accessible to humanity as it evolved toward greater awareness. Brennan's report concludes with the survey team's departure at dawn on June 22nd, leaving behind a family that had achieved something unprecedented in human experience. The surveyor's final glimpse of the Whitfield property showed Clara standing in the morning light, appearing simultaneously as a normal 8-year-old child and as something far more profound, a being who had transcended the limitations of individual consciousness while retaining the essential qualities that made her fundamentally human. The Pennsylvania Railroad Company's subsequent attempts to locate the Whitfield property for follow-up surveys proved unsuccessful. The farmstead, which had been clearly marked on the survey team's maps and documented with precise coordinates, could not be found by later expeditions. The area where the property had existed showed no signs of human habitation, featuring only undisturbed forest that appeared to have remained unchanged for centuries. Clara Whitfield's ultimate fate remains a mystery that transcends conventional categories of disappearance or death. Her transformation from a sleepless child to a being of expanded consciousness represents one of the most profound documented cases of human evolution in recorded history. Whether her achievement of transcendent awareness represents a glimpse of humanity's potential future or a unique individual phenomenon remains an open question that continues to challenge our understanding of consciousness, reality, and the infinite possibilities that may exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary human experience. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Sinister Memory. If you enjoyed today's investigation, subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell to be alerted when we unveil our next dark chronicle. Share your thoughts about this case in the comments below. We read every single one, and your ideas often lead us to our next investigation. Until next time.